Hi, Jocelyn. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's so good to see you. It's been a while.
It's been a long time.
I mean, we chat through, I guess, text or messenger or whatever, but to see you in person again, it's nice.
It is nice. I think it's been at least, gosh, almost 10 years probably. That's scary.
Has it?
Ah,
No. No,
2000,
no, no, no.
2016 is when I left. Yep.
Are you serious?
Mhm.
Wow, I definitely lost track of time.
COVID got us all. So it was,
Right, right, right. Oh my gosh. I still remember being in your office at school talking to you. So I don't know, just doesn't seem that long ago. You early on were at my house too,
yeah.
trying to help us get set up.
Mhm.
So anyway, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners and then um, just say whatever you want to offer up, and then we'll get started on our discussion today about ABA.
All right. So my name's Josselyn Ensor. I am a BCBA, so a board certified behavior analyst, and I'm licensed in the state of Maryland. I also have my master's in special ed. So I was a special ed teacher back in the day, long time ago, and a special education administrator of schools. And so I have, I guess I can talk a little bit about my background and sort of how I got into things. So I started in college. I was taking a class with Dr. Collier, who I think everybody in Carroll County knows. Um, and it was behavior modification back then. And I fell in love with it. I wanted to be a child psychiatrist. And I took that class and I said, this is what I want to do. I loved behavior analysis. And someone in my class said, I'm doing ABA in home for a family who has 3 boys with autism and Fragile X, and they're looking for people to work in home with the boys. So I raised my hand and I got the information and I started working with them my sophomore year in college, I believe. So it was a long time ago in the 90s. um, and uh, and then I worked with them in the school system for a little bit and in home. And then they went to non-public and I followed and I started at Kennedy Krieger as a behavior. I started as a classroom person, like a program aide, and then quickly became a behavior resource specialist. And I, kind of was in charge of behavior for 2 different classrooms. And then I was there for almost 5 years. I also worked in CARD for a short time where I was learning to administer a bunch of different tests and the ADAS and learning to diagnose and all of that good stuff. And it was a really cool experience because I got to learn from Dr. Landa, who is really super smart. And then I was also working part-time for Trellis. So I started at Trellis as one of the first employees, probably the first 10 employees. And I was a case manager and for the autism waiver. And then I started full-time as the first teacher in the Trellis school. So before we even started the school, I started in the clinic and learned verbal behavior because it was a little bit of a different methodology than what I had been used to. And then we started the school in 2007, and I think it was August 2007. And I taught for like 3 years. I was the preschool teacher, and then I became the principal for a year while Tara was kind of doing outreach. And then I became the education director. So, and I also did some stuff with therapeutic integration program there. I was the site supervisor for that, which was like an after school program. I did some consulting with some of the other school systems, and we had like a contract with another school system in on the Eastern Shore, and we would go down and train them, which was really cool because they reminded me a lot of our county. Very, rural area. And then we did some consulting with, in schools. We had a couple kiddos who were out in other public schools. And through that, I was contacted and asked to interview for the position of coordinator of special ed for Carroll County.
Mhm.
So I did, and it was a pretty rigorous process and a couple interviews with lots of people. And I got it. And then, so I started there in 2016, January 2016, and I had one other behavior analyst with me at the time, and we quickly grew our team, and we made a whole bunch of changes. We did lots of training, and I was there for almost 5 years. And then I was approached by someone who was from a nationwide ABA therapy provider, and they wanted me to start their Maryland office. And so I put my notice in Carroll County, and I ended up leaving the day after they announced that schools were closing for COVID. And
Wow.
yeah, and so, yeah, it was March 13th was my last day in Carroll County, and they schools closed on the 16th. So that was
Talk
really
about timing.
it was so stressful. And to learn a new job, they were based out of Michigan, so I was learning. I was the clinical director for Maryland. I was starting from the ground up, and I didn't ever meet a single person that I worked with face to face because of COVID. And so I had a supervisor who didn't have any kids. I had both of my kids home with me full time because my ex-husband was working out in the field still, and we were afraid that he'd get the kids sick. And so I was learning a new job, like homeschooling my kids. My son was, I think, first grade or second grade. And it was a complete nightmare for the entire time.
I bet. I bet. I mean, learning a new job is ginormous on top of everything else. I mean, it's an undertaking. Oh, yeah, before we got started on the recording, we were just saying that it's true. We lost like 2 years of our life. Like it's a big freaking blur.
Yeah, it really is. It's like, that was 2020 or 20, like it all fit together.
Yeah.
Um, and I could not, like, it was so stressful. I had been furloughed, like it was a mess. And so I left there and I said, we're going to the beach, kids. And
I love that.
took my pension out, and I said, I don't care. You need your mom, and your mom needs her mental health. And so I just took a little bit of time off and kind of reassessed. I thought I was going to start an ABA therapy business. I kind of changed my mind, and so I just started to work for another company that provided ABA therapy. They were bought out in the first like month or two that I worked there. And so then they started another company separate from the one that was bought out. And I was there for like a year, and then I left to start my own thing in November of 2021.
Wow, that's a long road. I mean, it's a ton of experience, but like a long road to get to where you are right now. Wow. First of all, I just want to start by saying I think you're one of the most talented BCBAs I've ever met. And I just want to say how grateful I was to you from let's see. I'm sure my timeline's off, but like 13, 14 years ago you came to our house and tried to get our what I call the therapy room set up so it was functional. You taught me a lot back then because I was muddling through a lot back then, and my boys were 19 and a half months apart. And while Aiden is doing absolutely amazing at this point and getting ready to go off to college, and he's a true rock star success story. But back then it was like, times two. I was in the weeds. I was working full time. I didn't know what I was doing. I was floundering. So I'll forever be grateful that, you came out a few times to consult with me and help me, get up and running. And then, of course, I was thrilled when Colin came to Trellis and saw your pretty face there. And I have so much gratitude to that school. I know that you do too. They're such an integral part of Colin's journey.
Yeah.
Especially the second half, like, because when he was in early intervention at Schaefer Center, he had a wonderful staff there as well. Absolutely helped support him and get him to a really great place. But he was aging out. It's time for change.
Mhm.
And I'm just so grateful that Trellis was available because it's what he needed, and it continues to be what he's needed. And I'm grateful that they expanded
Yeah.
slowly into high school because it's needed. I mean,
100%. And I feel like, I think that they were such an integral part of everybody who kind of comes into contact with them, the kids, the families. I think they're so, Kathy started it way back when. Then Tara was really, the main part of the school, and she started the school. And I think she was, my mentor for so long. And I mean, I even worked with her when I was at the ABA therapy clinic, Blue Balloon, like a year ago. So it was really cool to be able to work with her again. And she just taught me so much about, just staying child-centered and family-centered and just doing what the kid needed. And that's kind of, I know that's gotten them in trouble sometimes where, but that's what it's all about, because every single kid is so different.
yeah,
And to be able to kind of piece together whatever you have to do to make it work for a kiddo and really look at them and their individual needs, I think they do it so well. And I remember what a struggle it was for you to kind of make that decision, because it was a huge leap for you. I think we talked for like at least a year about Colin. Like first grade or something. I remember going to visit him at Schaefer, and I can't. I mean, to send your child who doesn't come home and tell you how their day was or what happened, you have to rely on these people, and so I can only imagine like what it's like to send your child somewhere and to trust in them, and after they've been somewhere that you're really comfortable with. And I'm glad that that we were able to get you guys there, and that they've been able to continue to meet his needs, because I think that he has a lot of unique needs and they do really well with meeting kids where they are. And
they do. And I think like in the younger grades, there's like a little bit like when you talk about meeting them where they are, that learning doesn't have to take place at a table or desk in the classroom, right? That natural learning environment's huge. I think it's a little bit more, maybe I'm wrong, but it's a little bit more flexible when they're younger, like in early intervention, because I can remember Colin doing speech therapy on the playground, for example, which it's awesome because they got out of him what they needed to get out of him being outside, sitting up on, the slide or whatever it might be.
I think that people are cracking down, the schools and the state and Common Core and all of that stuff kind of came down. And there's a lot of scrutiny on especially non-public schools where, it's really hard to implement the state curriculum with kids who, that, I mean, I know that stuff is important, but to me, whether a kid can go to the bathroom by themselves, that's more important than being able to identify all the continents in the world, And
Absolutely.
so I think Trellis, like I remember how hard we worked. We worked so hard. We consulted with so many people. We poured through all kinds of like curricula, and we wanted to find ways to kind of make it work for our kids and teach them what we knew that they needed to learn, but also teach them what we knew they had to learn. And I think as they got older, I think things changed with Common Core. But I think that they have a magnifying glass on them. And so they're not allowed to play all day. And you have to think of more creative ways to meet them where they are and make it not look so play-based, but still functional and still learning in the natural environment. And that's a really hard balance.
Yeah.
And so, it's tough. I mean, we struggled with it in the school system. We struggled with it at Trellis. I think everyone else struggles with it.
Mhm.
It's tough. And so I think that they've done a really nice job. And I think that, they really didn't, there's no blueprint, there's no manual for how to do it. Everybody just kind of, there's no one curriculum that works for everyone. You have to kind of pull from everywhere, from all kinds of interventions, and then kind of put it all together and see what you have and how can you make this fit into Common Core too. And it's tough.
Yeah, Common Core is tough in the mainstream setting. As you probably well know, and maybe not because you're in the school system, but Aiden would bring homework and I wouldn't know how to help him in the earlier years.
My son's teacher just emailed me today and said he's having a hard time with the protractor. We're going to send it home. Can you please practice with him tonight? And I said, sure, after I reteach myself.
Right, right. I remember being just a quick side note. I remember going in to help some of the kids. I think it was like third or fourth grade practice math. Just pulling out a group and just doing like a small tutoring 20-minute with this group. And we were working on division. And it occurred to me, I was handed all the material. I'm sitting at the table with these lovely kids. I was so excited because I was volunteered at Aiden's school because I'm usually at Collins school. And it just, I wanted to spend time at Aiden's school. And it occurred to me halfway through, oh my God, I'm teaching them freaking long division. I'm messing up their lesson. I don't know what I'm doing. so I can only imagine with like the special ed curriculum how incredibly difficult it is. And luckily you have so many talented people in the non-public settings specifically that can pull and, sort of strategize. And I know that you have that at Trellis. When you transitioned over to Carroll County and you were the one, it had to be much more difficult. But I know you also had a lot of resources and experience by then.
I mean, it was really difficult, and it was difficult in its own way. I think that in Carroll County, the way that things are set up, there, you have a special ed supervisor for each elementary school, and they each, when I was there were two, and then we had three. So when there were two, they had like 12. One had 12 and one had 13 schools. So they were in charge of all the special ed kids for all those schools. And then you had a middle school, and then you had a high school. Then you also had administrators. And, for the preschool program, we had one principal and one assistant principal. But then, elementary, sometimes you had two or three assistant principals. And then, same with high school and middle school. So you have all those hands in the pot. And then you have, so the teachers are getting evaluations from 50 different people. They have lots of opinions coming in. I was over the entire autism program, so I had 5 different locations to go to. Plus, I had to go out and do consults for the cases that were either like going to court or really high profile, or kids who were engaging in a lot of really severe problem behavior. So it was a lot to juggle. And so while I was not there, then the teachers have questions and they're going to people, and we didn't have a behavior specialist for every single location either. So they were splitting their time. So it was not a lot of right resources sometimes. And I think that, Carroll County especially, they do an amazing job with what they have.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've seen lots of school systems. I've had to go observe kids, I've had to consult. And so it's Carroll County does it as I think really well. Obviously, every school system can do things differently. I think
Mm-hmm.
because they're so small, they have the ability to be more flexible. But it's all in what what you've seen. And I used to say, like, some of these people think that this program is great. And while it has really great aspects, your great is so relative because it's only as great as you've seen. And when I would see Trellis and the way that the progress that they were making, I could say, like, my great is so much different. And you might not have seen this before, and and that was the one thing that I appreciated from Rusty Gray, was that he was like, I want this in Carroll County.
Yeah.
He said, I want a trellis in Carroll County. And so I liked that because we got a lot of funding and we were able to kind of get in there and start training people. I mean, in our first year alone in Carroll County, we implemented Relias training. So we had everybody trained in ABA, just like the basics, because so many people would look at us like we had 15 heads when we started talking about ABA, and we're like, this is what we're supposed to be doing, and the methodology that we're supposed to be following, and nobody has a clue what we're talking about. So we did training for everybody in the autism program, and it was like almost 40 hours of training that they had to do that was mandatory. And in the first year alone, we reduced the percentage of, or we reduced the number of restraint and seclusions done in the county or in the autism program by 95%, which
Huge.
was huge because that was their way of managing behavior. And we really focused on being proactive, teaching communication, and being proactive in listening to the kids. And I to see the light bulbs that went off, and to talk to the staff who said, would pull me aside after trainings and say, like, this is the first time that anybody has like talked to us like we have a brain, and that, we just appreciate that you see us as people, and that we have skills that, and we're trusting these people with their kids every day. And to say that, they shouldn't have a say is, I think, crazy. And so I would say, I
Yeah.
don't care who in the school. I don't care if the custodian has a great idea. Great, bring them in. Like, it doesn't matter, because these kids are so complex and their needs are so unique, and nobody has the same experience. And I don't know more than this person. I just have different experiences, and maybe more of the experiences in this setting. But, everybody has a brain and everybody has ideas. And why not listen to them? I think that is it's a big deal to, to be so inclusive of and accepting of, everybody who's working in the program, because everybody's working so hard.
Absolutely. There was no doubt that Carol has a ton of highly motivated, extraordinarily talented teachers with really big hearts. And as a parent who has gotten to know so many teachers over the years, I also can second what you said. They were frustrated that they felt like they didn't have the support they needed to help support some of the kids. And then not every kid obviously is going to, when you were talking about the program looking great, but that's like subjective. There's going to be kids that are never going to succeed in that program, no matter how good it is. And Colin is one of those kids, right? And we had our IEP years ago. Every once in a while, Carroll County would try to recruit us back or get us to, convince us that they could help them. And I don't know if it was because it was us and they knew we were really big advocates and very involved in the community. And we had that sort of reputation that we were never, ever going to, give up that fight. Or if they genuinely saw that they could not meet Colin's needs. But regardless of what it was, the last IP we had with the county where they tried to convince us to come back lasted like 10 minutes. The principal was like, no way I can support him.
And it usually comes down to the principal. And I mean, there have been times where I would go to a meeting and like Nick would say, like, do you think we can serve this kid? And I say, like, yeah, I think we can, but like, I'm not 100% sure, but let's try.
Mhm.
And it was a pretty quick, like, we tried and we can't. And so I liked that. Like, I know that there are so many families who have fought their butts off to get their kids non-public in Carroll County. But I also like that a lot of times they're quick to recognize when they really can't meet a kiddo's needs. And I think it's all about how informed the parent is and how squeaky, how squeaky
Yeah.
they are. And I tell parents that all the time, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And the more you speak up and the more you advocate, the more services and the more attention you're going to draw. And that's important when your kid is, in a school system or any school with a lot of other kids around who might have greater needs, but that doesn't mean that they're more important. And so, I think advocating for your kiddo and you have always been a very, very strong advocate for your kid and for both your kids. And so I think they see you coming. They know that.
Yeah. And, I think a couple things. I definitely have seen so many parents struggle in other counties. I mean, my heart breaks for them because I've seen the extent that they have to go to because it's psychologically, emotionally, physically taxing. It's exhausting on top of, what you have to maintain and, make sure that your kids being taken care of on a regular basis. You have to somehow figure out what you're doing to fight this fight. In most cases, and this is just me talking as a parent, in most cases they end up getting an advocate. 50% of the time that works, and then that usually comes down to a lawyer. And I've seen people close to losing their homes. I've seen people lose their homes. It's awful. And I do think, I'm not speaking for everybody because I know that there are some situations out there, but I think in general, our county does a decent job of eventually doing the right thing.
Yeah. And I think that, I think the sad part, like it breaks my heart when I read these posts on Facebook from parents who are just expressing their frustration about things that they know. And, as a parent who might not be as informed or knowledgeable about education or the whole due process or the law, it breaks my heart that, I had so many parents who would call Trellis, and I was basically giving out like free consultation to so many parents. They call and they'd say, okay, I want to send my kid to your school. How do I do that? And I'm like, whoa. Like, this is such a
Yeah.
long process. And I would talk to them, and, it all starts with the IEP, because if you have a poorly written IEP, it's really easy to say a kid's making progress. And,
Mhm.
but a parent might not know that. And parents trust the educators, and it's just the same as trusting your doctor. I know this is bad probably, but I don't trust every doctor. I don't trust any doctor, really.
Neither.
I don't trust anyone who is dealing with my health or my education or my children's health or education, because they're trained in one thing. That doesn't mean that they know everything in the world. And, so to believe like what somebody's telling you, it might not be that they're lying to you, but that they only know what they know. And these parents are putting their trust in, the education system or whatever. And, it sometimes you see things and you're like, wow, like I can't believe some of this stuff is going on. And this parent just doesn't know or doesn't, I had a parent come to me one time at Trellis. They were going to get non-public placement. Like it had already been decided that they were torn. And I said, so like, what kind of, skills, what kind of things does your child like? Like, what are their strengths? And she was like, she can't do anything. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, she's like, I said, can she do puzzles? No. Can she do this? No, she can't do anything. And I was like, okay. I said, so what does she do like by herself? Like in her free time? She's like, well, she puts these like number puzzles together. And I'm like, okay, well, she can do something. Like, but it like, I mean, the school had just kind of ingrained it in her brain that like her child was so low functioning that she could do nothing. And, you
Yeah.
know, and I read this on another parent on Facebook, her, and I think you commented on the same post. She's an author and her son has autism, and he is, I guess, aging out of services, about to be 21. And his ABA therapist or BCBA, I'm not sure which, said basically he's not making progress. I don't know what else to do with him. And so he can't make any more like he's not going to make any more progress. And we're going to have to get, just transition him out early. And then all these people were commenting like ABA and BCBAs and blah, blah. And I said, on behalf of my profession and my, the people who I'm working with, like, I am so sorry that anybody would tell you that your kid's not going to make progress. Like, everybody can make progress. It's up to us. It's our fault. If we can't get them to make progress, it's our fault because we haven't found the right way and to unlock what they have in there. And so I said, I am so sorry. What she should have said is that she doesn't know what she's doing and that she can't figure it out and that she's not willing to go ask a mentor or someone else who can brainstorm with her ideas, and she wants to give up. That's what she should have said to you, because your child is capable and she's not the right person to figure that out. But as a parent, I can't even imagine how frustrating it is, because I've heard it from so many parents, that they know that it's in there, and that's our job to bring it out. And I hate that. I've read so many times that professionals say, they can't do this. And when I was in the school system, to go into a classroom and show them like, this kid can do so much you don't even realize, and to see the light bulbs go off, that's what I loved about being in the school system. Like, I loved showing people that like they were wrong, and they weren't upset about it. They were excited about it. And that was like so cool, and so cool on the kids' behalf, because now they have a chance, and it doesn't matter how impacted a kid appears. Like, just because they can't talk means nothing. Like, what is going on in there? We have no idea. And chances are, they're there with us hearing everything we say. And, just because they can't get it out doesn't mean that they're not a vegetable. They can talk, they can think, they have so much going on. And when you step back and look at that and figure out a way to get it out, you see that, I don't know how to make a difference in more ABA therapists or BCBA's lives. But I mean, they need to be able to see that, to trust parents and to see how capable kids are.
What you said was just so perfect and beautiful. I know how involved you are, like, in the community. I love seeing that you put your knowledge and time into responding to posts on social media, because sometimes that's all parents have is 5 minutes on social media. You hit the nail on the head, because just because you have letters behind your name and training and experience doesn't mean you're good at your job. It's like anything else, right? And what I would say is that this might actually be a really good segue into the sort of introduction of ABA for the audience. But I think maybe some of the therapists, because ABA is so data driven, and because of the way their minds operate, maybe they shouldn't be practicing therapy, but should be doing something just with numbers.
Yeah, 100. I agree with you 150%. And I think the disservice that, and it's a huge thing in our field right now, that there's so many BCBAs who don't have that like training, that are getting such poor supervision, because there's not enough BCBAs to cover anything. I mean, there's not even enough BCBAs in the world to cover the amount of people who are like who need ABA services. Somebody posted something the other day on like LinkedIn with like numbers, and basically like we BCBAs are outnumbered by the number of people with autism who need services. And I'm talking BCBAs who are in the ABA field, administering
Hmm.
therapy to people with autism, but there's a lot of other, people are starting to kind of branch out too in ABA because of burnout and all of that. And, I think when people expect you to bill, like all the ABA agencies, they, now they're starting to kind of change their tune. But before it was like, oh, you have to have this many billable hours. Well, it all sounds great, but it's not that easy, especially if you're in home and you're traveling all over the place. You don't have that many hours in a day. And so you have these people who are so burnt out, who are working with families who are so exhausted, who are working with kids who have such great needs, who are trying to train staff who are like, they don't have any time to put the amount of training in that they need. And then you're trying to supervise a new person and teach them all that you can. And it's so hard. And so what happens is these new BCBAs are not getting great supervision, and they're getting these experiences that are so like just traditional ABA that it's like robotic. It's like, well, I learned this and this is what I do. It's not taking a step back. Like, I don't care if people can, I shouldn't say this as a BCBA, but I don't care. I'm more interested in whether someone can implement ABA effectively and ethically than if they know all the terms and all the words for all the things.
Sure.
If you can't implement it, then what are you doing? Like, I don't care how much you know and how much you can spout out from a textbook. Can you do it? And, I've seen so many people who can't, and they're so rigid in their thinking, and they think that they know better. And they don't realize how much they have to learn and that anybody can teach them. And that, I think, is what is happening in our field, and it's very sad. And so you have all these people who have a really bad taste in their mouth about ABA, or people with adults coming forward saying basically I was traumatized or I was abused or all of these things. And I think it's because people didn't know what they were doing. They were implementing ABA in a way that it shouldn't have been implemented. And it doesn't mean that ABA as a science is a bad thing. It just means that the people implementing it probably needed more training and support, and they didn't have that. And they were doing the best that they could, but it wasn't good enough,
Yeah. Yeah. So can you explain for people who might be, because there actually are a lot of people who don't know what ABA is. And we kind of take for granted that everybody in the community does. It's in no way a negative thing. It's just people do homeschooling or alternative therapies. You're a teacher, so I'm just going to give it over to you and let you explain it.
So ABA is applied behavior analysis, and it is the science of manipulating the environment to produce socially significant change. I know that, I've heard so many times that people think ABA is this thing that their kid gets, like my kid needs his ABA. It's not that. It's the way that we look at how we manipulate the things that trigger behavior, how we prevent the triggers from occurring, how we teach behavior to prevent behavior from occurring. And when I say behavior, I mean anything that somebody does is behavior. So, a lot of times it's behavior is overused and it's seen as a negative thing, like it's hitting or kicking or, biting. It's not. Behavior is anything that we do that interacts with the environment. So me waving, me talking, me breathing, it's all behavior. And it's socially significant. So it's what's really important. I've seen so many times people tracking kids who are stimming or hand flapping. Like, if it's not getting in the way of what they're doing, who cares what they're doing? I don't care if a kid is standing upside down on his head. If he's able to learn, great. Like, let him stand on his head. I don't care.
Mhm.
And so it's really, that's the key thing, is that it's socially significant and that it's really working with interfering behaviors. So what are the barriers to learning and to being able to access your environment? We don't have to change who someone is. We're just trying to give them the most independent life and help them be as successful as they can be, and kind of helping them develop the skills that they need to do that. And, so much of problem behavior is a result of people not having the skills to, they've learned to do what they can to get their needs met. And that's what anybody does. And so sometimes that's it manifests in problem behavior, and so we have to teach them the skills that they need so that they don't have to engage in that behavior anymore to get their needs met. And a lot of times it's hard and there's lots of procedures and strategies and stuff that's under in the science of ABA and for how we do that. But that's really, it's just about how we kind of teach people and how we reinforce behavior to increase it, and how we manipulate things to try to prevent behavior from occurring, but then giving the appropriate skills so that, we're not just walking on eggshells all the time. We're teaching people how to handle situations more appropriately, or, without as much distress. and and so I think that is really where our field, the people who have been doing it for a long time, or the people who are being really trained right. I mean, that is kind of what verbal behavior is. Verbal behavior is looking at language and the function of language and communication and all of that good stuff. And that is behavior. And so it's hard to talk about it because a behaviorist's perspective on speech and things kind of varies on, from a speech pathologist. And so it took us a long time at Trellis to find speech pathologists that we could really kind of integrate, and mesh with. And I think that if people aren't willing to kind of take a step back and appreciate somebody for what they know, but marry kind of the two philosophies together, so you have somebody like Lori Sova, who is phenomenal. And because I appreciate everything she knows, I look to her as a professional, as an expert. The same thing with her. She would ask me questions behaviorally, like we were able to work together. Molly Riggs, another one, like she knew, AT. And when we were able to put our minds together and use what we knew, like we could do amazing things. And so I think that, verbal behavior is more about, looking at motivation and how do we use motivation to teach kids, and how do we teach them in naturally occurring contexts. And whether you do that, you teach and then generalize into the natural environment, or vice versa, that's kind of what it's about. And it just depends on what's best for the kiddo. I think that is where we're missing the boat, is that people aren't willing to just look at what's happening, and how do we're not training little robots. I don't care, you know what I mean? So I think that's the hard thing, is that people want to train people with autism to respond in a certain way, and that's it. And that's not like real life. And so we have to take a step back and really you have to program for so many different things and teach so many different things. And it's so many broken down components that you really have to account for. And if you can't see that whole big picture, I think you get lost and you just end up implementing what you would implement with everybody. And that's where we get these little programmed robots who aren't really, thinking and doing things based on what they want. They're just doing things that they've taught, and they don't really understand the concept of things, if that makes sense.
It does. The thing that I would say is that for me as a parent, life skills, and in particular, a very high focus on safety, would be the most important things for me. I just don't care about the academics. Now, having said that, I know what Colin knows, and I know it through other avenues, right? He might not be able to do it in the way that it's presented or that we're asking him to do it, but he shows me in other ways the information that he has,
Mhm.
and understands. In terms of ABA, it has helped him stay safe. And I really want to highlight that to parents because my child in the past has had some very aggressive and self-injurious behaviors. I don't want for people to misunderstand that it was just a temper tantrum. These are full-blown sensory meltdowns and or internal responses to what's going on with pain and discomfort inside of him. I'm very open about the fact that he has seizures, that he has pandas, he has a few other co-occurring conditions, icing on the cake, right? He's not a rarity. This is sort of our population of kids right now. A lot of them are going through that. So I am grateful because ABA has allowed him to learn patience, to learn tolerance, to learn more appropriate ways to handle difficult situations. He uses an array of communication devices at this point, and he's been at this for years. He's 16 now. It was PECS, and then it went to LAMP, and he still takes speech, and he is doing spell to communicate. He has all these avenues, plus he has signs. So he knows that, hey, if I can communicate this, it'll diminish the anxiety or at least prevent it from escalating, and it'll help me keep my body in control. And if it wasn't for this type of learning or teaching, I don't know what that would look like. I don't want to say it wouldn't or it would. I don't know what it would look like. So for me, it's really important because of the safety aspect of it. And maybe you can touch about this a little bit more, how ABA has changed or evolved since you started practicing over the years. But there definitely is a split in our community. I think some of the older folks are saying that they are traumatized by it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes from what you learned and how are you trained. And I know, like, I can say, unfortunately, I was one of those people who was forced compliance and follow through. And, we did timeout, we did punishment procedures, and we did, I mean, it makes me sick to think about it now because it's so, I mean, that way is just, it's an egotistical way of implementing a science that can be implemented so many different ways. And so you're going to do this because I told you to do it, not you're going to do this because I've taught you and I know you're prepared, or something else is going on that I don't know is going on in your body. And they don't have a way to communicate. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, there's so many parents that I see of kids who are nonverbal or non-vocal. And, I met a family who, the mom was a single mom. She was very, like, she didn't have a lot of money at all because she had to quit her job to take care of her son. She had fought the school system, and he was, I think, 16 when I met him, and he lived in New York. He was my boyfriend's neighbor, and I ended up talking to his mom, and he had no communication system, none. And so to me, it makes me sick that
Yeah.
no one taken, like, and his mom was like, well, he had PACS at one point, but like it all fell by the wayside because he didn't pick it up. And so there's that mentality again. Well, he couldn't get it. No, because the one communication system is not it's not a one size fits all. So, and maybe you need a couple different ones. But people need to have a voice. And
Mm-hmm.
what happens when his parents are no longer living? Then he goes to a group home and people don't know him, because he can't communicate. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
or can only communicate with his mother. And
Mm-hmm.
so I got a communication book and took it to him, and I gave his mom some resources, and she said he literally, like, takes it everywhere he goes. He walks around with it. And I think that like he was finally able to communicate some stuff. It opens the door for people to communicate that something's not, I mean, I can't imagine. And no one understands what you're saying and having a message or having something to say. And, you know, I think that we really have a lot to learn from people who have kind of found their way to communicate, and can now explain and describe what it's like when you have autism and when you're non-vocal. What is it like? Because they describe it very clearly that, you know, they understood everything going on around them, that they couldn't get it out, but they wanted to, that they were thinking all of these things. And when they finally got that voice, I mean, the stuff that they were able to, you know, express is insane. I think that we, like, just as a whole, educators, special educators, you know, ABA therapists, whatever, BCBAs, I think that we are doing someone a disservice by not teaching them to, like, that is number one, teach them to communicate, because it just opens the door to everything else in the world. I think it's so important. And I think that's where, you know, we're failing a lot of people. And I want parents to understand that like, you can teach your kid how to communicate. Like, we can teach your kid how to communicate. We should be teaching your child how to communicate.
Yeah.
You know?
First of all, that's just an amazing story about the kid in New York, and so grateful that you were, you know, able to give him that book and sort of open up his world, because, and the mom's world, it's like, you don't know what you don't know. It's very sad and overwhelming, but this is a very emotional, stressful, exhausting life journey. And, you know, you're always learning. So I don't know. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole about, you know, the psychological part of it. But what I will say is that philosophy of communication, then behavior, then learning. I felt like when we changed schools, the approach was just a little bit different. Once Colin got established and transitioned, I told you earlier, in that first year, his behaviors went down by 85%.
I mean, because, you know, when you're looking at functional communication, it does so many things. And so that's, as a, you know, as a science, that's kind of where everyone is moving, is the compassionate ABA. And I heard someone who is kind of old school, but an awesome clinician. And she said, like, stop using compassionate ABA. Like, we should always be using compassionate ABA. It shouldn't be a thing, because then it makes it sounds worse when you're not saying we use compassionate ABA. Everybody should be using compassionate ABA. Everybody should use compassion when they're working with human beings. And that is really kind of like a spotlight has been kind of shown on that. And I think it's incredibly important. And there are whole organizations now that are moving that way. And there is procedure program that this BCBA developed, Dr. Greg Hanley. It's called Practical Functional Assessment and Skills-Based Treatment. And it's really looking at teaching functional communication and breaking things down into such small components to teach people that they have a voice, that their voice, that they, what they want, it's assent based. So it's based on what they want and what motivates them. And so his idea is that, you know, when we do functional behavior assessments to determine why behavior is occurring, problem behavior, we're trying to look at, you know, certain specific functions. Is it for attention? Is it to escape something that's undesired? And Dr. Hanley says it's all those things mixed together, and he calls it synthesized reinforcers. And so a kid doesn't engage in problem behavior just to escape from work. They want to escape from work. They want to escape from class. They want to see their favorite friends. They want to play with their favorite toy, with their favorite person, playing with it with them. So it's all those things. It's tangible. It's escape. It's attention. It's all of that that's combined that makes it so powerful. So it's, let's teach them how to tolerate everyday life, tolerate disappointment, tolerate demands, tolerate it, and learn how to advocate for yourself and ask for what you want and deal with being told no sometimes. But it's a specific way of doing it. And so many people are kind of moving in that direction. It preserves human dignity, and it looks at them as they have choice in the matter. They have choice in their programming, and they have choice in their therapy. And that is huge. And to give someone that choice and to give someone that voice and teach them to do that. I mean, you see like what a huge difference that makes, because you're not being forced to do things. You get to do things because you want to, but you're being, pushed a little, but not, in a way, because we know how capable all of these people are that we're working with. And it's just trying to figure out how to get it out. And so it's a methodology or a program that a lot of people are moving towards. It's one that I did a training, and I'm level 1 credentialed, which is not this really that I went through the course, and I've tried it a little bit, but it's kind of the way of where a lot of people are going in ABA. And I love it because it's just so ethical. If you haven't heard of it, definitely check it out, because I know that you would love it and you would love to listen to him talk. And he's just such an awesome, smart, amazing guy.
I made a note, and I'll also put, these resources in the show notes. Not familiar, so I'm definitely going to research them more and listen to the training. I'm so glad there's such an emphasis on this right now, because Colin has had a successful experience, and so did Aiden. I've always had loving, kind, compassionate people working with them and wanting more than anything just to get them from A to B. I would say over the years, there was probably only 2 therapists that clearly were not working out. It was one for each kid. I spoke with the BCBA. They swapped them out, and then everything was smooth again. And that was just an observation, right? You just kind of know. You look at and you're like, this is never going to work, or this is not working. Those things happen. I am grateful to be able to say that my experience has been positive. It gave Colin so many tools, including, there was a whole program just on stop. And if for people who are new to ABA, they're probably like, what do you, but it's a whole program designed to keep your kids safe. And when they see that stop sign, they're going to stop. It could save their life. It's so important. I remember safe and unsafe programming, climbing the banisters. Is that safe or unsafe? What other program? Oh, the stove. There's a whole program around the stove. Like you said, it should always be a kind, ethical approach. We continue to create tools so that people that are just going to learn, ABA, I think they don't call them ABA therapists anymore. Is it RBT?
So registered behavior technicians, I think by the end of this year, everybody has to be an RBT. That's through insurance. So there's different rules and laws, and healthcare requires some things, and so behavior technicians, ABA therapists, they call them all different things in different states.
Okay. And so whether you're, ABA therapist, RBT, BCBA, luckily they continue to have these sort of new innovative tools, as they should in all areas of life. It's all about innovation and, how we can continue to support these kids in our community. And, it's all about, autonomy and safety and independence to the best of our ability.
Teaching them, and I think this is the other part that a lot of people fail to do. It's teaching that, don't avoid it, because eventually you're not going to be able to avoid it. Parents, I hear it all this, and I 100% understand why they do it, because I'm sure I do it with my own kid. And it's so much easier to do things with other people's kids than your own. I know that for a fact, but so many times parents they don't realize that they have basically put themselves in jail, and they can't go anywhere. They can't do anything because they are too afraid of what's going to happen, of their child isn't going to like it. It's something different, it's something new. They're going to have a tantrum, they're going to have a meltdown, they're going to be unsafe, people are going to look at them, so many different things that eventually they stop doing things. And then they say, like, we haven't been on a vacation in 10 years because all the child's behavior has shaped their behavior, and vice versa. So, I think the one thing that is so important is that, and what ABA can help with, is identifying those times, and how do we teach slowly, break it down, and how do we kind of teach people the appropriate way, or more functional, socially appropriate ways of being able to navigate their environment and be more independent, and do all the things that they can and should be able to do, but they've learned over the years they might not have the tools that they need to be able to navigate their environment or process their environment, and that's the sensory piece that comes in, that is so huge with kids on the spectrum, or anybody on the spectrum. And so, if you don't understand how to advocate for yourself, or have a way to advocate for yourself to reduce certain sensory experiences or input, of course you don't want to go somewhere when you don't have a way to get rid of those things that feel so horrible to you. It's teaching people not to walk on eggshells. Like, let's target it, let's do it in a way that's going to be humane, and that's going to preserve their dignity. But we need to teach it, because it's not real life to avoid every situation, in the world, or you're going to end up in a bubble with your kid and can't do anything or go anywhere. And I think
True.
The skills-based treatment is really looking at that and targeting those things in a way that incorporates, it's based on the principles of ABA, but it's really, how do we do this so systematically and slowly, and in a way that's not going to push these people to engage in really dangerous problem behavior, and teach them that when you engage in behavior, we hear you and we're going to back off. And we're going to do it when we see the precursors. We're not going to push you to the point where you are in crisis mode, because how does that feel for people? Like, when they're engaging in these really explosive tantrums that are dangerous to them and to other people, like, it doesn't feel good. They don't like it. They're not trying to get you. They can't express what's bothering them. I think that's really what we need to be doing, is looking at what is preventing them from being able to be as independent as possible, from enjoying their lives as much as possible. And then, like, where are they going? Like, what do we see for them? So do we see people out being mathematicians? No. So who cares? Like, let's focus on the stuff that, like, what do we want them to really do? We want them to be independent, to be able to live independently, to be confident. So those are the things that we're going to teach: how to navigate your environment, how to navigate your house, how to be more independent and do more things for yourself, and how to use supports and advocate for yourself. That's where we need to kind of go as they're getting older and starting to transition out into, the adult age.
Yeah, there was a period of time when, my kids were younger, that I started to hibernate. It was just because I was shutting down as a human being. How can you do what you're doing, working full time with, two kids with significant needs and therapies and this, that, and the other thing? You're exhausted on the weekend. But then I was like, all right, I've had enough of this. I need to live. They need to live. And so we started going everywhere. I have on an autism shirt right now. I don't know if you can really see it, but it's got a lot of words on it that make up what autism looks like, right? Because it's not just a neurological disorder, it's a full body disorder. For most of our kids in this generation, it's regressive autism. And the reason I wanted to point out my shirt is because that was my go-to. When the kids were younger and we wanted to go out and about and into the community and go get something to eat and go to freaking Hershey Park and go to wherever, I'd throw on one of my autism shirts and I'd go to it. Yeah. And that way you don't have to do anything. There's going to be people that are impatient and annoying and rude. And I've had lots of confrontations over the years. the shirt or the hat for dads or even for moms, it helps a lot. It's kind of like back off, give us space. We're in our bubble. We might be struggling a little bit, but just be kind and leave us alone. Or, maybe offer, is there anything I can do to help you? That's also a form of kindness. But I just wanted to put that out there because, like you said, you don't want to trap yourself into a situation where, because that's not real life. When you're never leaving the house and you develop this fear around leaving the house.
And I can only imagine. I mean, I know that there are times when I don't take my own kids to the store because they fight, and I don't feel like dealing with it. So when you're
Yeah.
a parent and you have so many other things to worry about, taking your child to teach them how to go behave appropriately in Target is not at the forefront of your mind, or not, you're in survival mode. And so that's not what you're thinking about right now. You're thinking of getting by each day. And I think that is where ABA really should be helping families. Like, how do you live the life that you want to live, and how do you help your child live the life they want to live, And we can do that. And I think that it's sad to see how many parents don't know what's out there, and that it's available, and that they're entitled to it. And a lot of times that it can be, their insurance covers it. And, there are a lot of, like, when I went into the school system at first, I started telling parents about, the habilitative, like, that your insurance can pay for it. And people would be like, you can't say that. And I'm like, why? It's a service that they're entitled to. Like, I don't care if I shouldn't say that. Like, then I'm doing my job and I'm helping
Yeah.
people. And if they don't like it, then sorry. So many parents need help, and they just need to know what's out there. I feel like I want to do what I can to help parents live as much of a life as they want to, and that's something that I've thought about doing, something where, providing respite care in vacation towns, or certain things like that. And how do you get that covered to help families enjoy vacation? A lot of families don't go on vacation anymore. They don't have someone who's trained to go with them to help out as an extra set of hands. Most people on the spectrum don't like change. They don't like a different routine. That's something that we have to teach. And so, if you haven't been working on that for a long time, and then you go somewhere that's completely different, they might have a hard time, and to have an extra set of hands for people, I think, would be so helpful for families. I would love to do something like that. I have so many ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love the ideas, again, it's just all about innovation and how can we continue to push forward. We've all lived through COVID. The world is a very different place. One thing that has happened because of COVID is that there's constant turnover in all the fields that we need support in. So what do we do with that? Because I feel like a couple things. One, how do we continue to support our families? And two, as someone who's managing a business or overseeing a business, how can we retain employees? You're constantly on a cycle of training. I have a theory. This is not easy work. And so for me, it all goes back to money and benefits. And I don't think that our RBTs or ABA therapists are getting paid enough. I think in the private sector, they definitely are getting paid more. We have to look at that collectively as a community, because families are literally dangling by a string right now.
Mhm.
Like, it's magnified to a degree that's almost incomprehensible to manage all this while raising a child with these type of needs.
Yeah. I think that, I think it's money. They are, in the ABA kind of behavioral health field, they're starting to pay RBTs a lot more. I think it's more about the competency and the training. You can give people as much money as you want. They're still going to implement what they know, or not implement what they don't have to. And I think it's based on, how are we holding people accountable? How are we training people? Are we looking at, like, how to support them? Are they burnt out? Are we requiring way too much of them because they do have an extremely hard job to do? how are we supporting them and training them? And then how are we holding them accountable to really be implementing things with fidelity and to make sure that they understand what they're doing and that they are, they're being paid based on their performance or compensated based on their performance instead of just a flat rate. Because if at ABA, you look at the principles of behavior, when you reinforce a behavior, it increases. And so if there's no incentive for better behavior, then people aren't going to engage in better behavior, and you're going to keep getting the same, results that you've been getting. So how do you motivate people? How do you entice people to want to do the things that are hard, but to do things right and to do things better and to always be improving? I think you have to figure out what motivates people and give that as incentive.
Yeah. And then the last question would just be going back to, how do we support our families who are so desperate? Does your company do like any online training or support? Because obviously there's long waiting lists for services in the home.
Yeah. Focusing right now on families who are waiting for services and on adults who are kind of waiting for behavior services. So I'm in the process of getting approved to be a DDA vendor for self-directed families.
Nice.
And so working with adults, which is it's coming full circle because I have families who have reached out. Their children are adults now who I worked with 10, 15 years ago. And I'm like, oh, I know you. Let's, pick up where we left off. So it's kind of cool to see and to be able to do that. But then also, so the program that I was telling you about, skills-based treatment, Greg Hanley and another doctor, Kelsey Ruppel, developed a program called the Balance Program. It's very good for families who are on wait lists because it's parent training and teaching parents how to handle emerging problem behavior. So how to really teach kids to cooperate and tolerate things and communicate, rather than engaging in problem behavior. So I'm getting ready to roll that out as well, which will be kind of like it's going to be done like telehealth. And so I'm really kind of just trying to figure out how can I help families who are on wait lists, who are waiting for those services to start because they're desperate for those services, and how to train parents, because even if there aren't enough BCBAs, if parents have the information and know what to do, then they can do so much before they're able to get started with services, and they're able to kind of be a bigger part of their therapy team because they understand things and they know what to look for, and they know, they can be more, more engaging in the process because they have a better understanding. So that's kind of where I'm trying to put my focus now with my business. I have tons of ideas, and I'm only one person, so I can start recruiting more people to help me out so that we can kind of make a bigger impact, because, there's such a need for so many different things. I actually am getting ready to roll out also free consultation sessions. So for the World Autism Month, I felt like rather than donating, financially, I wanted to do something that would help families. So I'm going to offer free consultation, probably 45 minutes or hour-long consultations to families, because I think sometimes they just have some questions. Getting on the right path and getting those questions answered sometimes can make a huge difference. So
that is priceless. Like, that is like the most generous gift you could possibly offer. So thank you so much for offering that to the community. I genuinely appreciate your time, and I love talking with you. You're, and again, truly one of the most talented BCBAs I know. And thanks for everything that you do for our community. You do it with such love and passion and compassion. So thank you.
I love what I do.